Good morning, this is me again, Kristen Tara, and I'm going to discuss the Sinclair et al. Discourse analysis model. But before that, what is a discourse analysis? Discourse analysis look at the running conversation involving a speaker and listener. In discourse analysis, the context of a conversation is taken into account as well as what is being said. This context may encompass a social and cultural framework, including the location of a speaker at the time of the discourse, as well as nonverbal cues such as body language, and in the case of textual communication, it may also include images and symbols. Understanding discourse analysis. Discourse analysis looks at conversation in their social context. It takes into consideration the social background of the speakers and the social setting of where the conversation is happening. Discourse analysis melds linguistics and sociology by taking into account the social and cultural context that language is used. It is a bridge that connects the two studies and in order to decode the more authentic meaning of the conversation. It can be used by businesses, academic researchers, or the government, any person or organization that wants to better understand an aspect of communication. Since we're talking about understanding the conversations in a reading between the lines manner, it can be used in different fields to further analyze what is being said or to further improve communication. A lot of models are being used for discourse analysis, but today, I'll be sharing some information about Sinclair et al. Model.
Man, what are we, a team? No, we're a chemical mixture that makes chaos. We're a time bomb.
You need to step away.
Why shouldn't the guy let off a little steam?
You know damn well why. Back off.
Oh, I'm starting to want you to make me.
Yeah. Big man in a suit of armor. Take that off. What are you?
Genius, billionaire, playboy, philanthropist.
I know guys with none of that worth 10 of you. I've seen the footage. The only thing you really fight for is yourself. You're not the guy to make the sacrifice play, to lay down on a wire and let the other guy crawl over you.
I think I would just cut the wire.
Always a way out. You know, you may not be a threat, but you better stop pretending to be a hero.
A hero? Like you? You're a laboratory experiment, Rogers. Everything special about you came out of a bottle.
The S&C model has served as a starting point for discourse analysis and a basis for more current models of discourse analysis, and certainly, it appears to have been often adopted by respected TEFL and linguistic researchers. This discourse model has been described as the litmus test for whether or not a lesson is communicative. That's because it tackles how communication takes place between teachers and students. However, the S&C model is not designed to handle pupil-to-pupil interaction in project work and lessons, which neatly fit into the S&C model tend to be overly teacher-based. Therefore, data taken from a student-centered classroom should not easily fit into the S&C model, and adaptation of the original model would become necessary for analysis to proceed. Sinclair and Coulthard found in the language of a traditional native speaker school classroom a rigid pattern where teachers and pupils spoke according to very fixed perceptions of their roles and where the talk could be seen to conform to highly structured sequences. This type of data was chosen because it represented a more simple type of spoken discourse than other less structured varieties of interaction. We listed further examples of how the description has been developed and diversified in Coulthard and Montgomery 1981, Coulthard in Brazil 1979, Burton 1980, and Vindola 1987. These diversifications cater to data collected from less rigidly structured discourse genres than those chosen by Sinclair and Coulthard for their 1975 analysis. DeBoer on 2009 says that such discourse is heavy on teacher display questions whether the teacher knows the answer, but merely wants to know whether the student can correctly answer. This is counterproductive as their overuse deprives students of the opportunity for meaningful communication. The S&C model employs a hierarchical system modeled on Halliday during 1961. The S&C model was devised in 1975 and slightly revised in 1992. It's like Halliday's model, which is also a rank scale model and consists of 5 ranks. These 5 ranks are lesson, transaction, exchange, move, and act, and they are related to one another in a consist-of relationship. The ranks are hierarchical in nature, with lesson being the largest unit and act being the smallest. Transaction is a structure expressed in terms of exchanges. Act, the lowest rank in this scale, are speech acts, also known as the whole experience. The boundaries of transactions are typically marked by frames whose realization at the level of form is limited to 5 words. For example, okay, well, now, right, good. Uttered with strong stress, highly falling intonation, and followed by a short pause. While focus contains the main thought or the meta statement. In this example, well, today I thought we'd do 3 quizzes. The frame is the word well, while the focus is today I thought we'd do 3 quizzes because it contains the topic or the meta statement. Now move on to exchanges, which make up the transactions. Sinclair and Coulthard identified 2 types of exchanges in a classroom discourse. These are boundary exchanges and teaching exchanges. Boundary exchanges signal the transition from one section of the lesson to the next and are initiated by the teacher, whereas teaching exchanges are where questions are asked and answered and feedback are given on answers. As seen in the table pictures, there are 5 main classes of moves in the S&C model. Frame and focusing moves, which realize boundary exchanges, and opening, answering, follow-up moves, which realize teaching exchanges. As elements of structure, these are labeled I, R, and F, and the S&C model is often referred to as having an I, R, and F 3-part structure. To have a short glimpse at moves, we will go back to the previous slide wherein a theme-move structure was proposed for exchanges: initiation, response, and follow-up. We will dive further to move later on, but the 3-move eliciting structure is the normal form inside the classroom for 2 reasons. Number 1, it answers directed to the teachers that are difficult for others to hear, and thus the repetition when it occurs may be the first chance some children may have to hear what their colleagues said. And then number 2, many of the questions asked are ones to which the teacher questioner already knows the answer. The intention is just being able to discover whether the pupil also knows it. Going back, we've discussed that the framing moves indicate boundaries in the lesson, and focusing moves are the main statements or meta statements about the discourse. These moves signal the transition from one stage of the lesson to the next and provide information about the different stages of the lesson respectively. Teaching exchanges can be further divided into 11 subcategories, which include 6 free and 5 bound exchanges. Let's look at the examples on the next slide. In the first column, we can see the different types of free exchanges or the subclasses of free exchanges. The second column is the structure if it's I, R, or F, or initiation, response, or follow-up. And in the third, it explains the function of the exchange. In this bound exchanges table, we can see on the first column the subtypes of the bound exchanges. On the second, the structures, I, R, F. And the third, like on the other slide, it shows the functions of the exchange. To further understand, here are some examples of the IRF structure. Another scenario would be when a student replies to the teacher's question, the other students might not hear it clearly sometimes, so the teacher needs to repeat the student's words so as to make it clear to all the students. What's more important is that the teacher should give feedback to the student's answer to show whether the answer is right or whether it is the answer expected by the teacher. Now, going back to moves, let's just reiterate that each of the parts of the exchanges are given the name move by Sinclair and Coulthard. As we can see, each of these exchanges consists of 3 moves, but it is only in number 1 that the first move seems to be functioning as a question. The first move in number 2 is heard as giving information, and the first move in the number 3 is used as a command. Equally, the second move seems to have the function respectively of number 1, an answer, number 2, an acknowledgement, and number 3, a non-verbal response or like taking the box. Sinclair and Brazil prefer to talk of initiation, response, and follow-up. It does not particularly matter for our purposes which set of labels we use, but for consistency, the 3 moves will be called initiation, response, and feedback. Let's not be confused. We can also call the first move an exchange an opening move, the second an answering move, and the third a follow-up move. All of these terms are the same and referred to as the 3-part structure of an exchange. We move on to acts. Moves are made up of acts, which are the lowest rank of discourse and are similar to morphemes in grammar in that they cannot be divided into smaller elements. In the next slides, we could see the types of acts, their notation, and their functions. On the first column, we could see the acts or the name of the acts. On the second is the notation or how we transcribe it if we put it into writing. On the third column are the functions, and then on the fourth one, we can see the Roman numeral number 4, which represents the move. For Roman numerals, you can say that number 1 or letter I is the lesson, number 2 is the transaction, number 3 is exchange, 4 is the move, and then number 5 is act. The numbers, on the other hand, further expound on which category of moves do these acts are under. Now, the next slides will show the structures of the 5 main types of move and the classes of acts of which they comprise. So we have 5 types, which is move opening, move answering, move follow-up, move framing, and then move focusing. In the first column, we can see the elements of the structure or the parts of it. On the second is the structure itself, how we transcribe it, and then in the third, we can see the meaning, the little transcriptions or notations that we put in the first and second columns. We go on to some principles that we must remember in the S&C model. Number 1, every exchange has to be initiated, whether it be a statement, a question, or a command. Equally naturally, someone responds, whether in words or action. Number 2, the status of the follow-up move is slightly different. In the classroom, it fulfills the vital role of telling the pupils whether they have done what was the teacher wanted them to do. In other situations, it may be an act of politeness, and the follow-up elements might even be extended further. The patterns of such exchanges may vary from culture to culture, and language learners may have to adjust to differences. They also vary from setting to setting. When we say thank you to a ticket collector at the station barrier as our clipped ticket is handed back to us, we would not be expecting not at all from all the ticket collectors. The classroom is a convenient place to start, as Sinclair and Coulthard discovered, but is not the real world of conversation. It is a peculiar place, a place where teachers ask questions to which they already know the answer, where pupils have very limited rights as speakers, and where evaluation by the teacher of what the pupils say is a vital mechanism in the discourse structure. Conversation outside classroom settings vary in their degree of structuredness, but even so, conversations that seem at first sight to be free and unstructured can often be shown to have a structure. What will differ is the kinds of speech act labels needed to describe what is happening, and it is mainly in this area, the functions of the parts of the individual moves, that discourse analysts have found it necessary to expand and modify the Sinclair-Coulthard model. As a recap of the hierarchical Sinclair-Coulthard model, here are again the 5 ranks. At the very top are the teacher's lessons, since the S&C model focused on the classroom settings. Under the lesson, we have the transaction, which is made up of exchanges, and we all know that exchanges are made up of moves. The most commonly is the 3-part structure, which is the IRF, or the initial, the response, and then the follow-up structure. At the bottom, we can see the act, which makes up the moves, and we all know that it is the most basic or smallest unit of discourse. Sinclair and Coulthard's model is very useful for analyzing patterns of interaction where talk is relatively tightly structured, such as between doctors and patients. But all sorts of complications arise when we try to apply the model to talk in more informal, casual, and spontaneous contexts. Because of the rigid conventions of situations such as teacher talk and doctor-patient talk, it is relatively easy to predict who will speak when, who will ask and who will answer, who will interrupt, who will open and close the talk, and so on. But where talk is more casual and among equals, everyone will have a part to play in controlling, monitoring the discourse, and the picture will look considerably more complicated. For this exact reason that the model has been revised numerous times so that it could reflect the complexity of real-life conversation. The SNC model is more complicated than it seems, but today we have discussed the basics. Thank you for listening.
In the stars tonight, so watch me bring the fire, set the night light.
Hello, this is Sanimi Santos, and today we'll be talking about question-answer sequences by Harvey Sachs. Let's start with a brief background of Harvey Sachs. So he was born on July 19, 1935 and died November 14, 1975. He was an American sociologist influenced by the ethnomythology tradition, and he pioneered extremely detailed studies of the way people use language in everyday life. He worked at a suicide counseling hotline in Los Angeles in the 1960s and studied the recorded calls. He strongly disagreed with beliefs that prominent linguists like Noam Chomsky have, which conversation was too disorganized to be worthy of any kind of in-depth analysis. On the book Talk and Social Organizations, he discussed on the preferences for agreement and contiguity in sequences in conversation. He mentioned 2 points at which we make improvements to a yes or no answer questions. First, the choice between response types. Second, placement in turns. He is concerned whether there are rules for selections between yes and no answers, and to where in their respective turns the question goes and the answer goes. In his article, Sachs emphasized that what he'll be talking about involves not very complicated things, but a consideration of very, very simple things. He mainly focused on the use of sequence in a fairly specific way, differentiating serial organization from the sequential and being interested primarily in the sequential. Sequential here means roughly that the parts which are occurring one after the other, or are in some before and after relationship, and the organization as between them. Here is an example conversation that he provided on his article. It is showed that B answered apparently, which is a yes-like response. So here is the preference for a yes-like response in number 1, I suppose, and the answer designed by the reference to that preference agreeing with the preference, as we will put it, apparently. And on the second example, he provided for a preference to a no-like response. So we can see here that on B, speaker B answered no to the question, well, is this really what you wanted? So on the second concept, placement in turns, he mentioned contiguity of question and answer, which we know generally begins with question and followed by answer. So that's the usual sequence. But then, questions can be parts of turns with other things in them, as can answers. He also mentioned that contiguity of question and answer sequence takes collaboration and producing an answer that agrees with its question, as the questioner putting the question at the end and the answerer putting the answer at the beginning. Also, the questioner designing the question in such a way as to exhibit a preference for some answer, and the answerer to pick in accord with that preference. And with that, he came up with 2 general principles, which are contiguity and agreement. This is where he confirms that there is an interaction between the preference for contiguity and the preference for agreement. Now you can see in this example the response is not only formed up so that the disagreement is made as weak as possible, but it is held up for a great part of the turn. Now, one of the consequences of having these things being pushed around inside the turns that they are in, we are led to look at the serial organization of the components of turns. Then a lot of different things will pop out about answer turns. So there could be a variety of things that go in front of them and then can get treated as going in front of disagreements. And then they may have an import in signaling the future forthcomingness of the disagreement. Something like, well, or I don't know, for instance, as the beginning of an answer turn usually precedes something less than an agreement. And that is how he illustrated the interaction between agreement and contiguity, and disagreement and non-contiguity. Now, having considered answer turns in which there is an answer with something else before it, we can also look at places in which there is a question at the beginning of a turn and something else after it. Now, a class of such apparent exceptions to the earlier proposed positioning of questions at the ends of their turns can be isolated, which bears interestingly on the contiguity issue. Here, the class involves turns that have two questions in them, a first and a second. If you can also see on the example conversation, there is a first question and a second question. Then there are two answers. Note that the first answer is an answer to the second question, and the second answer is the answer to the first question. Now, it is rather a general rule, of course, that if there were two questions, you are going to have two answers. But then the order of the answers is the reverse of the order of the questions. Next is the exception to single topicness. Here, we are talking about the flexibility which can be introduced between answer and question, which allows other kinds of relationship than single topicness. So you can see in the example, we have know why, then we are back to why did you ask the question. So we could build a next question after why that connects to why, like why, what's the matter? Then you are moving in such a way to begin to get the possibility of a stepwise topic shift. That is to say, what you can begin to build in this is the way in which topics can move within turns. So we can catch what we naturally know, which is that topics do not change just at the boundaries of turns. And of course, the speakers can orient to producing changes within turns, which can be intrinsically smooth changes. Next exception is disagreements cast in the agreement mode. In response to that where you live Florida, B obviously does not live in Florida. He might live in California. He could say no, but he doesn't. He finds a way of providing an agreeing response. This is one way in which an orientation to agreement might be said to operate to shape an answer in partial independence of what the facts are. In examples 9 and 10, we can see that one outcome of the shaping of responses in favor of agreement is that there will be a position in which to put in elements that could otherwise appear as disagreements, which can then be cast in the agreement mode as being modifications or one of the exceptions. Also, you may note that the way in which they are ironic in a bit is to produce an agreement in the first instance and then modify it away. Number 4. Designing the question with an orientation to getting an agreement. In the examples, we see that the questioner is designing the question not just to get a personal preference, but is designing the question with an orientation to getting an agreement. Here, it's not that the questioners want to get the right answer. It's that they want to get the question that can be or will be agreed to. And last but not the least, misunderstanding machinery. In this example, note that the compromise is achieved over a series of turns addressed to better understanding. The persistence of the preference for agreement can be seen in part by the use of the misunderstanding machinery to try to resolve disagreements when they occur. Note too that Sachs emphasized that this is formal in the sense that people do not try to do that, but there is an apparatus, as he said, which means that it is natural to have a misunderstanding, but then at the end, agreement can be seen. And that ends my report on Sachs' work on Q&A sequences. Thank you for listening.
Hi again! So to continue the discussion about the discourse analysis models, I will be presenting one of the models, the discourse intonation model. So for today's agenda, we are going to define discourse, intonation, and of course, we are to enumerate all the important aspects of the discourse intonation model. To start, so what is discourse? In linguistics, discourse refers to a unit of language longer than a single sentence. To study discourse is to analyze the use of spoken or written language in a social context. Discourse studies look at the form and function of language in conversation beyond its small grammatical pieces such as phonemes and morphemes. So discourse is the way in which language is used socially to convey broad historical meanings. So it is a language identified by the social conditions of its use, by who is using it, and under what conditions. Language can never be neutral because it bridges our personal and social worlds. What is intonation? Intonation in phonetics is the melodic pattern of an utterance. Intonation is primarily a matter of variation in the pitch level of the voice, but in such languages as English, stress and rhythm are also involved. Intonation conveys differences of expressive meaning such as surprise, anger, and weariness. In many languages, including English, intonation serves as a grammatical function, distinguishing one type of phrase or sentence from another. In addition, intonation is the use of changing vocal pitch from rising and falling to convey grammatical information or personal attitudes. So for example, are you scared? Is this yours? He doesn't have a car. I haven't read this book. So let's proceed with our main agenda for today, discussing discourse intonation model. Discourse intonation model was proposed by David Brazil, Malcolm Coulthard, and Catherine Johns Lewis. David Brazil is the major proponent of this model. So just for a short background for Brazil, he was born on May 1, 1925. He was a research fellow at the University of Birmingham Fulham in the 1970s. He was also a member of staff in the Department of English in the university. Some of his great works include the communicative value of intonation in English, which was published in 1985 and was revised in 1997. It also includes pronunciation for advanced learners of English in 1994. So Malcolm Coulthard, on the other hand, was known as the Emeritus Professor of Forensic Linguistics. He was also an English teacher in the London Institute of Education. Some of his famous works are Introduction to Discourse Analysis and Advances in Written Text Analysis. He was also famous being known as the Foundation President of the International Association of Forensic Linguistics and the founding editor of the journal Forensic Linguistics, known as the International Journal of Speech, Language, and the Law. Lastly, we have Catherine Johns Lewis. Not much information are provided for Lewis. She is just known for his best work, which is the intonation in Discourse. So what is Discourse intonation? Discourse intonation is a comprehensive and workable description of many pitch phenomena which is based on sound and explicit principles. Discourse intonation is an approach to the teaching and analysis of everyday speech. It consists of 4 components: a theory, a set of categories, a notation, and a transcription practiced. Discourse intonation attempts to explain how intonation patterns in English affect the communicative value of speech through the use of falling and rising tones along with the changes in pitch. So, Discourse intonation model. Discourse intonation had its beginning in the formal descriptions of holiday, but was developed into a complete theory by Brazil. It also focuses on the relationship between the speaker and the message and between the interlocutors and on the other hand. So lastly, all intonation choices made by speakers are a function of the discourse developing between them. In its most elemental form, this theory states that all intonation choices made by speakers are a function of the discourse developing between them. Intonation helps speakers show how each of their utterances are related to other utterances and to the discourse as a whole. Moreover, all intonation choices are tied to the context in which they occur. In contrast to the linguistic universals of grammar-based descriptions, it would be impossible in the discourse approach to isolate a stretch of speech from its context and make any generalizations about intonation meaning. In order for us to better understand this model, we need to be familiar with the following notations and symbols. The first one is a double slash, which is for the beginning and ends of our tone units. Tone units will be discussed as we go through our discussion later on. For example, the bus is stopped. The bus is stopped is our tone unit, and this symbol is used on both sides of our tone unit. So next, the capitals. This is to give emphasis on our prominent syllables, which will also be discussed later on. In the example, the word dark is capitalized, and this is our prominent syllable. It is followed by the underlined capitals to determine our tonic syllable. In our example, walk is our tonic syllable. Then, the arrows which are used as an indicator of the tone used in a sentence. We have the fall, rise, rise, fall, rise, and level tones. Lastly, we have the up and down arrows which are used to distinguish the pitch level on our prominent syllables. So we have 4 important systems that comprise our discourse intonation model. We have the tone, prominence, key, and terminal. Before we elaborate the first system, let us first know what a tone unit or tone group is. The tone unit is the basic building block of speech. It is also widely used as a unit of phonological analysis in most theories of intonation. It includes a single complete pitch pattern, and it is composed of proclitic, tonic, and enclitic segments. Are four systems developed within this framework. Rather than viewing spoken language as a sequence of separate words, Brazil sees it as being made up of group of words and sounds of which are usually run together. So let us highlight the three important segments of the pitch pattern under our tone unit: proclitic, tonic, and enclitic segments. So what is aclitic? In English morphology and phonology, aclitic is a word or a part of a word that is structurally dependent on a neighboring word, also known as host, and it cannot stand on its own. So clitics are also like affixes. One interesting property of clitics that differentiates them from other affixes is that while an affix will be limited to attaching to a stem, that is particular type of lexical category such as a verb, a clitic is not so limited. It can be attached to entire phrases or even words with other clitics. So the most common examples of clitics include the possessive clitic apostrophe s and verbal clitic apostrophe ve. For example, the student's assignment. So the clitic apostrophe s is attached to our noun student. Another example is we've been friends for years. Our clitic apostrophe ve is attached to our pronoun we. Prolytic segment is a clitic which phonetically joins with the following word in English. So this is not commonly used. One famous example of this is the use of apostrophe T. For example, twas, which is also it was, and twere, which is also it were. Enclitic, on the other hand, joins with the preceding word in English. Examples are apostrophe ve for we've or we have, and apostrophe ll in it will. Lastly, the tonic segment. Tonic segment is a segment which has one or two prominent syllables, and the last of these is characterized by a significant pitch change or tone. Let us proceed with the first system, the tone. The tone is a pitch movement distinguished by their particular direction or contour. The tone is the carrier of our intonation meaning. So that meaning to say, it is conveyed by means of intonation and it evolves from the tonic segment of a tone unit. Under the tone, we have the syllable on which the main pitch movement begins. This is known as the tonic syllable. It constitutes the core of a tone unit and thus determines the tone of a tone unit. Basically, we have known that there are 5 types of tone, namely fall, fall rise, rise, rise fall, and the level tones. According to Brazil, each of these intonation patterns has its own function. They are either proclaiming tones for the fall and rise fall tones or referring tones for rise and fall rise tones. They are used either in contexts where the conveyed information is considered by the speaker as being already known to the hearer or in context where the message is considered to be unknown to the hearer. Proclaiming tones refer to new information that is not shared yet, while referring tones refer to the information that is already known and knowledge is shared with the listener. Proclaiming tone occurs where the speaker wants to express surprise, irritation, and strong personal impression. On the other hand, referring tones are often used in situations where the speaker wants to emphasize the fact that he occupies the role of the dominant speaker. So the level tone is an exception within this system of tones. It is neither proclaiming nor referring tone. Let us take a look at this chart. This chart is the tone system. Tones are further distinguished according to the dominance of the speaker. Take a look on the right part of the chart under the speaker's role. We have the dominant speaker and the non-dominant speaker. Dominant speaker plays the controlling role in the discourse, and he can use either the proclaiming tone or the referring tone. On the other hand, non-dominant speaker does not play the controlling role. To summarize, in the chart, we have the types of tone. There are two common types, the referring and the proclaiming. So the plus sign refers to the rise tone. For the proclaiming and proclaiming plus tones, also are fall and rise fall tones, the information are unshared and the speaker's role may be dominant or non-dominant. For the referring and the referring plus tones, also are fall rise and rise tones, the information are shared. Likewise, the speaker's role may be dominant or non-dominant. For example, do you eat rice? On the first one, we use the referring tone of the fall rise tone, which states shared information. It can be thought as, am I right in thinking that you do? Meaning to say, the information of eating rice is already known by the speaker and hearer. On the other hand, the next one uses proclaiming or fall tone, wherein the information is not shared and therefore the answer is not known. Meaning to say, eating rice is not a common knowledge between the speaker and the hearer. So the next system is prominence. Prominence distinguishes marked from unmarked syllables given to a property that is not inherent but only associated with a word by virtue of its function as a constituent part of a tone unit. If a word is used to remove uncertainties and was thus purposely chosen from a set of possible other words, it is made prominent. So the essential difference that distinguishes a tonic syllable to a non-tonic syllable is that it has a characteristic of pitch. A tone unit may contain either one or two prominent syllables. It depends upon whether the word is selective or not in the particular circumstance of the utterance. So the third key is the key system. Key is a relative pitch level chosen by speakers for each tone unit. From three choices, low, middle, and high. Key choices are made and recognized with reference to the key of the immediately preceding tone unit. Key describes the choice of pitch on a tone unit's one onset syllable. So the key has three levels, the high, mid, and low keys. High key states that the matter of the tone unit is presented as being contrary to the expectations of the hearer. A high key has a contrastive meaning, so the utterance is contrary to the expectations created in the previous tone unit. So the next one is the mid key. Mid key indicates that there is no particular assumption upon the part of the speaker about what the hearer's expectations are. So mid-key suggests an additive relationship in which both utterances are part of a series. Lastly, low-key occurs where the message is supposed to perfectly meet the hearer's expectations. So low-key, however, denotes an equative relationship. So this means that the information in the current tone unit is already expected. So let us take a look at the chart. We have the three types of keys which use the up, down, and forward arrows. So beside them are the meanings of each examples. In the example, she bought and vanished. Using the high key, we use the proclaiming tone with the symbol P. Our prominent symbols are bought and vanished. As we can notice, they are capitalized like what I've mentioned in our symbols and notations a while ago. In here, the utterance is contrary to the expectations, meaning our second tone unit and vanished shows contradiction to our first unit, she bought. In the mid key, she both bought and vanished. So the utterance is part of a series. Lastly, the low key, the hearer expects that after she bought, she will be vanished or she will vanish. So the last system is the terminal system. Also, a low, middle, or high pitch level choice made by speakers at the beginning or end of a tone unit. So termination choices relate to the key choices of the preceding and following tone units, whether these are spoken by the same person or an interlocutor. So it is also further classified as high, mid, and low termination. So high termination signals that the speaker expects a high key response from the hearer. Mid termination, on the other hand, anticipates a mid key response as in concurrence. So lastly, low termination has the special function of closing a pitch sequence. So high termination is an invitation to adjudicate, mid is an invitation to agree, and low termination has no expected reaction at all. Let us take a look at the termination system. We can notice the three key levels on the left part of the chart. For our high key, we have the high termination, which shows the expectation on the part of the speaker, which can be a yes or no or a contrastive answer. On the other hand, on our mid termination, the pressure to create a favorable response or a yes is present. For the example sentence, do you think this one's bigger? In this example, it uses a proclaiming tone. The high pitch level, which uses the upward arrow, was used for our prominent syllable, the capitalized word think. So the syllable big on the word bigger is our tonic syllable. In our high termination, the hearer's response may be a yes or a no. On the other hand, for our mid termination, the only expected response based on the analysis of the intonation is a yes. For our mid-key level, all the terminations are present. The only additional information is from our low termination, wherein there is no expected reaction at all, as shown on our example. Remember that our capital letter words are the prominent syllables. The capitalized and underlined word at the same time is our tonic syllable. In our low termination, we use the referring type of tone on our first tone unit and referring plus tone on our second tone unit. So lastly, for the low key level, only the mid and low terminations are present. So that's it for the fourth system. So to summarize this model, let us take a look at this illustration. So discourse intonation model. Under this is the building block of speech or our major component, which is the tone unit. Tone units are with two slashes or slants on both sides. Under the tone unit, we have the four systems that comprise our model. We have the tone, prominence, key, and termination. So the tone system has two types. The proclaiming tone, which is used for information that is not shared yet, and the referring tones, which refer to information that is already known. So tone is followed by prominence, in which the most important syllable in a discourse, also known as our tonic syllable, is present. So third is the key, which has three levels: high, mid, and low keys. A high key has a contrastive meaning, mid key suggests an additive relationship, and low key denotes an equative relationship. Lastly, our termination system, which also has three levels: high, mid, and low. High termination is an invitation to adjudicate, mid termination is an invitation to agree, and low termination has no expected reaction at all. So that's it for our discourse intonation model. Thank you for listening, and I hope you learned something from this discussion. Thank you again and have a great day.
Good day, everyone. I am Jorin Vidiji Ismael, and as we continue on our report, let's proceed to the next topic that we have: innovation in ESO teaching, and we will be focusing on various teaching strategies. Okay, so for my part, I'll be focusing on teaching of vocabulary and sounds. The report is teaching of vocabulary and sounds. It's under innovations in ESL teaching. So as I have said earlier, I have part 1, teaching vocabulary, and then part 2, teaching sounds. So let's begin with part 1, which is teaching vocabulary. So when we teach vocabulary, we have a variety of reasons. Okay, so it's important to identify vocabulary instruction in our teaching practice by considering why we are doing it. Why do we have to do it? It will help us determine which theories and techniques we should use, or at least try. Okay, so here are the purposes for teaching vocabulary. So the reasons include, number 1, improving reading comprehension in general, improving subject-specific mastery and performance, improving writing and speaking skills, test preparation, deepening students' ability to put their thoughts into the most appropriate word possible. Okay, next. So for teaching vocabulary, we have here teaching vocabulary is about context and repetition, what they need to know about the words they're using and using them multiple times explicitly. So here I highlighted context and repetition because how the students must know how to use the words, okay, and they must be exposed multiple times to the words so that they have the repetition, and then this will enable them to master the word. Here, the first one, exposure rates matter. So students need to be exposed to the vocabulary over and over if they are to understand and use the words effortlessly. Okay, so they have to use repetition. They must be exposed to the word itself. Okay, so when stories, for example, we watch movies, we read stories or texts. Okay, when stories or texts are repeated, students gain more word knowledge. Okay, so, it's very important for us to assess the students so that they can think critically. So these are the example questions that we can ask them. 4 components of effective vocabulary program. So according to Michael Graves, he argues that there are 4 components of an effective vocabulary program. So teach individual words. So teach new words explicitly, meaning on purpose. Okay, so make sure students understand the definition. Make sure that the definition are in student-friendly vocabulary so that they can understand. Doesn't help you to understand a word if you don't know the words in the definition. So you have to understand, okay? So make it student-friendly. Show the word in a variety of contexts. So they'll be able to know the usage and allow them to generate their own definition. Have them engage with the words interactively. They can play with them. They can do activities about them. So yeah, as a teacher, we have to vary the methods. So we don't teach the same way for every word. So we have to be creative here. So next, provide rich and varied language experiences. So here, we need reading, listening, speaking, and writing for macro skills experience across multiple genres. So here, we have to read out loud to students. We have to encourage, let's say, book clubs or English clubs and reading challenges. Okay, so the idea here is basically we have to create an environment wherein the students can use words. Okay, actual situations wherein students can use the language. Okay, so they can have varied language experiences. Okay, so here we can have individual activities inside our classroom or group activities. Next, teach word learning strategies. So here we have to teach students how to infer word meaning from context clues. So we have to teach students how and when to use a dictionary, okay, and a thesaurus, or foster word consciousness, point out useful, beautiful, powerful, or painful lessons, be playful with words. So that's why we have different vocabulary activities inside the classrooms to create consciousness so that the students can be aware of what they are learning. Initiate, we have to initiate new words syllable by syllable and then blend the word. So we have to enunciate it properly so that the student can master it also. Associate for A, associate the word with definitions and examples that students already know. So here, you have to connect the word with the definition and examples so that the students will be able to understand. Okay, connected to their prior knowledge or schema. Synthesize, okay, the words with other words and concepts that they have already studied, and they have the opportunity to demonstrate deep knowledge of the new word. Okay, so for them to understand, you have to synthesize the words with other words also and concepts for them to easily understand the definition of the new word, okay, because it's unfamiliar. And next, emphasize new words in classroom discussions. You have to emphasize and use it properly. Next one, we have here the 6th step of vocabulary introduction. It's very easy. So for step 1, okay, as a teacher, explains a new word going beyond reciting its definition. So you can tap their schema, background knowledge, or prior knowledge. You can use imagery, you can use motivation, you can use games. Okay, so step 2, students restate or explain the new word on their own words. So maybe they can do it verbally or in writing. Step 3, ask students to create a non-linguistic representation of the word. Okay, so they have maybe it's a picture, a drawing, or a symbolic representation for them to get the entirety, or for them to have an understanding of it, okay? Because it's easy whenever we have visual learners, okay? Step 4, students engage in activities to deepen their knowledge of new words. So we can use comparing words, we have to classify the terms, write their own analogies and metaphors. Step 5, students discuss the new word. Okay, so we have here group activities, pair, share, elbow partners. We can have group activities, okay? And the last one, we have step 6, students periodically play games to review new vocabulary. So we have your pyramid, Jeopardy, telephone. So we can also use gamification, okay, in order for them to review the new vocabulary. Proceed to part 2, which is teaching sounds. So here, this one is very connected to our previous lessons. Is the importance. Okay, so for effective communication. So no matter what level your students are, no matter how advanced or fluent they are, if their pronunciation of certain key sounds is incorrect, they will not be understood, or even worse, they'll be misunderstood by other speakers of English. Okay, so this is very crucial. For example, if an English learner talks about owning 3 sheep, okay, but actually means 3 sheep, the listener might assume that he or she is a very rich person. Well, the speaker in fact just wants to talk about his private little farm. So we can see here the difference between the pronunciation of ship, which is the vessel, and sheep. Okay, so if we pronounce sheep, which is the animal, as chip, okay, short sound, this might affect the learner's understanding or the listener's understanding. So this can be extremely demotivating for learners of a language, and it can also cause students to hesitate to speak, okay? So this is very important. So for effective communication, both receptive and productive skills are equally important. So this is why we need to equip our students with the necessary tools to speak and listen right from the beginning of our lesson, okay? So this is the important part. So next is the differences in phonemic script. Okay, so this one is very crucial. So if you're teaching students whose first language does not use the same alphabet as English, such as Japanese, Chinese, Korean, or Arabian, they will have an extra obstacle to overcome as they learn English because it's different, okay? So your students or our students are not just learning new words and grammar, but also a new alphabet and the sounds that each letter makes. So it's hard for these students. Adding some phonics lessons to your curriculum or to your lessons can be a great help. So the key concept terms in teaching sounds, and all of you are familiar with it, but let's have a brief review about it. So, okay. So consonants. So consonants such as B, C, D, F, etc. These are the letters of the alphabet that are not vowels. Okay, so the consonants are produced by some constriction of the air passages in the production of the sound. Okay, so next, let's have the consonant clusters. So here, in consonant clusters, we have pairs of consonants such as sh and ch that represents a particular phoneme. Okay, so we have a lot of consonant clusters specifically in grade school, okay, and early childhood education. Also in diphthong, we also use it in grade school and ECE. So we have 2 vowels sounded together, one of which glides into the other, as in the oi sound of the boy. Okay, so next, so we have IPA, International Phonetic Alphabet. So this is a chart comprised of standardized symbols representing the sounds or phonemes of a language. So we have exercises about this, so we are all aware of it. So symbols, right? So the rules that we have to follow. So minimal pair. We have here two words in which only one phoneme varies, such as cat and cow. The final sound is the only difference in these words. So minimal pairs are often used in pronunciation exercises. So at times, minimal sentences are also used. So for example, I caught a cat/cab outside my house. So you will be able to see whether the student can comprehend the sentence. Okay, so you can let them circle the correct word, which one is correct, cat or cab. Okay, so next one is next concept is phonemes. Okay, phonemes are individual sounds in a language. So English has about I think 45 distinct sounds with which we communicate meaning. Okay, so always remember that a letter in the alphabet does not necessarily represent a phoneme, okay, as it may have more than one sound. For example, let's use letter C. Okay, so as in cat, C, as in the letter C in face, and as in the letter C in watch. Okay, so we have different phonemes for a specific letter. Next one, phonemic chart. So phonemic chart is a chart such as the International Phonetic Alphabet. So this is a set of symbols that represent all the sound in spoken English. Okay, so by knowing the chart, you can tell which sounds are voice, or let's say this, use vocal cords for sound, or whether it's unvoiced. You'll be able to identify using phonemic charts. So phonemic script, as I have explained a while ago, okay, is a system for writing and portraying the individual phonemes, which is the sounds, of a language symbol such as phonemic chart. Okay, so this one is the system for writing, portraying the sounds. Okay, so phonics, next is phonics. Am I correct? Okay, phonics, the sound system of a language that relates sounds to spellings in order to develop reading and writing skills. So phonics are the sound systems of a language. Okay, so that's it. Phonology, on the other hand, phonology, we all know this, the study of the sounds or phonemes of a language. Next, voice consonants. Okay, so when we say voice consonants, these are produced by the vocal cords when pronounced. Okay, so for example, th in bathe. Okay, so put your hand to your throat when you pronounce this word, bathe, and you can feel the vibration when sounding the bathe. Okay, so you can see, or you can feel, rather, the vibration. Next, voiceless consonants. So when we say voiceless consonants, consonant sounds which are produced by the lips and teeth and not the vocal cords when pronounced. Okay, so for example, th in bath. Okay, so put your hand to your throat when you pronounce this word bath, and you'll feel no vibration. Okay, next, so we are clear with voice consonants and voiceless consonants. The last concept is vowels. Okay, so this sounds like A, E, I, O, and U, which are not consonants and which are produced without any constrictions on the air passageways. So we all know that one. So now, let's have teaching sounds, phonics, and pronunciation. So how do we teach? How do we teach phonics and pronunciation? So let's use the phonemic chart. Okay. So a basic tool in the ESL classroom is the phonemic chart. We must refer to the chart on a regular basis. You can search it. It can help our students get familiar with new words quickly, and they can sound out new words by themselves. So they can practice by looking at the chart. Okay, so maybe we can keep a poster-sized chart in our classroom or for example through we're using online, right? So or in the background of our screen if it's in online teaching, okay? So that the students can have easy access to it, or you can instruct them to print their own. So next we have tongue positions and mouth movement. So this is very important also. Use mirrors, okay? So using pictures of position of the tongue and the movement of the mouth for each phoneme will help the student understand the physical aspect of language production. So they will be able to know how they produce a sound by using their tongue and their mouth. Okay, so here by giving an example as a teacher and going through the movements with our students, so we have to do it with our students so that they might feel more comfortable copying us rather than trying only by themselves. So it's very awkward for them. So try modeling it. You have to demonstrate it and do it with them so that they will feel comfortable. Okay, so next we have word stress, sentence stress, and intonation. So here English is a stress time language. Okay, so we all know that. So it's very important to put the stress in the right place in the word produce and produce. Okay, project and project. Okay, so and the right words in a sentence also, so that they can convey the intended meaning. Okay, so this focus on stress goes for both productive speaking skills as well as for listening skills. So including intonation and stress practice in our lessons right from the beginning is very important for the students to deal with English as it's regularly used by other speakers of English. So they will be effortfully be using or speaking like the English speakers if they will be able to master the word stress, the sentence stress, and intonation. Next one, let's have the activities for the teaching of teaching sounds. Okay, so when we say here, activities for young learners. So here we have activities for young learners. So song sing along. Okay, so as we all know, kids tend to be enthusiastic learners. They aren't afraid to try out new sounds or mimic language, or they love the opportunity to get up and move around during class activities, right? So use that energy and enthusiasm. So let's use song sing along, TESL sing along. Okay, so songs work well to practice pronunciation with young learners. It's very effective. Yeah, Coco Melon, Baby Shark, right? The students can move and dance with phonic songs, which allow a total physical response and therefore better retention of the material. So a sing-along is simple activity for young learners and can be adapted for older students as well. Okay, so next is pronunciation bingo. So this is an effective game for teaching ESL. So to play, you have to prepare as being the teacher a bingo sheets with sample words for each of the phonemes. Okay, rhyming words. So rhyming words is very effective. We can include some rhythmic rhyming activities in our lesson, in which our students can repeat after us, the teacher. Okay, as the teacher. So in the rhythm of the music we choose, we can make or say connected rhyming words like boy or toy, toy, joy, joy, soy, right? So those are the rhyming activities. Next one, this is an example. teenagers and young adults as well. So here, teenagers and young adults are often quite self-conscious, right? So, and they tend to be shy. So preparing some but fun, appropriate activities like this are very important. So we have here rhyming pair memory game. So after some repetition drills and the target words and sounds, we can try this game. So we make cards with words that rhyme, like name, game, box, fox, tick, stick, and so on, and place them face down. So students take turns turning over the cards to find the pairs that they rhyme. So correct the teacher is also very nice one. So if you're trying to teach your students with stress and intonation, you can try correct the teacher. As a teacher, you say a sentence in a natural or a natural rhythm, and your students have to tell if you said it wrong or right. If they say that you were wrong, they have to say the sentence with the correct intonation, more like an error identification part. So for minimal pairs, we have phonics worksheets on minimal pairs because it's very good way to fill some minutes at the end of a lesson or to give us a homework or assignment. For adult students that we have and professionals, okay, so for adults and more advanced level professionals, phonics worksheets are safe to keep our students happy in a comfortable learning environment. So we can use worksheets in minimal pairs, the phonemic alphabet, word stress, and intonation. Those are good choices to, or maybe if you want, you can have listening exercises from speaking songs or the news or the movies or songs that we have heard as well, and have your students try to, what do you call this? Fill out another worksheets as well. Okay, so we can also use minimal pair games. Next one, how do we assess the teaching of sounds? Okay, so when we teach sounds, we can use monitoring so that we can see if they are understand it. We have student presentation, audio video recording, interview, and graded paper test. So that's the end of my report. Thank you for listening.
What are the different levels of formality in conversation? Do you use the same words when talking to different people? What's your conversation style? I'm Cheska Janie Renzo, and I'm going to discuss the conversation styles. Let me show you these sentences. The sentence says, "What's up? How do you do?" These are the same in meaning, but the first greeting is informal, while the last one is formal. We should know the degrees of language use. Just like in conversation, there are also different degrees of formality, and that's our main target today, specifically on the types of conversation styles. I have here sample of sentences extracted from dialogues. Let's try to analyze these pictures. What's the best sentence for picture 1? How about for picture 2? Picture 3, 4, and 5. So we have here, "Will you marry me, babe?" Picture 1. Next, "Oh guys, I could still recall our high school crushes. How's Lester?" Picture 2. The third one is about oath-taking ceremony. This is picture number 3. And the fifth picture is about dribbling. And the last one, picture 4, is the speech of Duterte. We will identify these dialogues later in which type of conversation style they belong. Since our main goal is to improve our communication skills, the choice of words and the structure of sentences should be considered. Otherwise, will be misinterpreted. We often hear the saying, "First impressions last." Do you agree? In some situations, this can be applied. Our manner of speaking should vary depending on the audience, occasion, subject matter, and the purpose of the communication. So what is a conversation style? According to Martin Ju, conversation style means the form of language that the speaker uses, which characterized by the degree of formality from the most formal to the least formal style. He identified the styles in 5 classes, which we are going to discuss one by one. Now, let me ask you a random question. Are you proud to be a Filipino? I'm sure you are, because why you wouldn't be? How Filipino are you? You want to know? Let's find out together. I'll be saying something that may or may not apply to you as a Filipino. If your answer to my question is no, put a smiley face on the comments. If your answer is yes, put an LOL emoji. Number 1. You say ano when you can't find the exact word to say. You even mix it up with English. Can you pass me the ano? The ano, the rice. Number 2. You can eat with your hands. Whether it be a sinigang or adobo, you love to eat using your hands. The next items are tough, but please be honest about it. Number 3. You know our national anthem by heart. 4. You can recite the Panatang Makabayan. And finally, number 5, you can recite the preamble. Can you? How many of you get 5 yes answers? You are truly a Filipino. Now, let's talk about the numbers 3, 4, and 5. The Philippine National Anthem, the Panatang Makabayan, and the Philippine Constitution's preamble. Now, you might be thinking, why are we talking about these things? Well, that's because these 3 are the examples of the first conversation style, the frozen style. This style rarely or never changes. It is frozen in time and content. It is generally used in a very formal setting. This is the most formal style for a respectful situation. It has a fixed and static language and uses long sentences with a good command of grammar. It is the most formal style wherein the audience is not allowed to raise any question to the speaker. Now, going back to the dialogues of pictures, which is the best example for frozen style? Any guess? It is the oath-taking ceremony. The picture number 3. Other examples are marriage vows, judicial sentencing, national anthem, pledge of allegiance, constitution, oath, creed, the Lord's Prayer, and religious rites and rituals. The characteristic of its delivery is monotone. It is called frozen because it already has pattern that cannot be changed. In written language, the frozen style can be found in historical documents. The receiver of this conversation style must take it seriously and pay attention. It is structured and planned by a set of people who are knowledgeable enough about its composition and content. This is also used in declamations or when you are writing a speech for a wide range of people. It must be well planned for it to be effective. Now, I have another random question. Do you like dressing up? Just like most of us, have you had a hard time choosing which outfit will be best to wear? How long does it take for you to dress up? How many clothes do you have? For the ladies, do you know that 92% of women own at least one clothing item that they had never worn? For men out there, do you know that some studies say that men check out themselves in the mirror more often than women? Whether you're a man or a woman, you always want to leave a good impression by looking nice. Just like what Charles Hicks said, looking good is not self-importance, it's self-respect. Keep in mind that you can't just wear anything you want in certain situations. What you wear should always be the appropriate for the place that you're in. Take a look at these two pictures of Lavi Poe. Notice how the first one looks so different compared to the second. Lavi Poe's first look is informal, while the second one is formal. Obviously, it's not a good idea to wear informal attire to a business meeting and vice versa. The same goes for conversation. We can speak in an informal style in a formal setting. Our conversation style should be appropriate for a situation we are in. Now, why are we talking about this? Well, that's because the second conversation style is the formal. As stated by Ju, formal style is generally used in formal situations where there is the least amount of shared background and the communication in this style is largely one way with little or no feedback from the audience. In addition, it is a style of speaking or writing that's neutral, orderly, controlled, and explicit. It follows certain protocols and it doesn't have an indication of close personal acquaintance. In the dialogues I showed you earlier, what's the best example for formal style? It is picture number 4, President Duterte delivering his speech. Other examples of this style are sermons, graduation speeches, pronouncements made by judges, announcements in school, meetings, interviews, sonas, orations, scholarly books or articles, research papers, and technical reports. While the goal of most writing is to communicate with much clarity as possible, the goal of formal style is to distinguish oneself as part of certain social group. It's about showcasing your ability to speak and write in an effortful manner. Now, have you ever heard of a term two-way? Like a two-way radio? Unlike a broadcast receiver which only receives content, a two-way radio is a radio that can both transmit and receive radio waves. We can only listen to our regular radios. We can't converse with a radio DJ because he can't hear us, right? But when we use two-way radio, he can hear us and receive messages. Two-way means allowing or involving movement or communication in opposite directions. Conversation is also a two-way process. Have you experienced an online class while having internet connection problems? What are the most common words you say? Hello? Can you hear me? How about now? Is it better now? I can't hear you. All of a sudden, you're going to realize that you just wasted almost 10 minutes just saying, hello? Your insistence on getting a response to a message is an attempt to engage in two-way communication with the person on the other end. And here's the consultative style. This is used in semi-formal conversation. This is the normal style one uses when talking to strangers or persons who are neither acquaintances nor friends nor relatives. The sentences used here are longer and spontaneous, or long and spontaneous. The speaker doesn't usually plan what he or she wants to say. So what is the best example for this? In the picture, it's about the coach and the athlete. Other example of situations are communication between teachers and students, employers and employees, president and his or her constituents, lawyer and client, expert and apprentice, and group discussion. The speech is generally unplanned since the speaker considers and uses the participation and feedback of the listener in his subsequent responses. The speaker here will supply background information while again, the listener or the receiver participates continuously. In the consultative style, or any semi-formal conversation we may be involved in, having the ability to listen very well will make the process much more meaningful. We need to listen carefully to the other person to come up with a valid response. However, do not just listen with the intent to reply. Make sure to listen for understanding as well, because this will make you a more considerate person. After all, just like what Bryant McHale said, one of the sincerest forms of respect is actually listening to what another has to say. Now, have you ever noticed the difference in the way you talk to your friends compared to the way you talk to other people? It's like you talk to them in special and unique way, right? You don't tell your mom, "What's up, homie?" You also don't greet your teacher by saying, "Hey, how you doing?" It doesn't just work that way. The way we communicate has a big impact on how we get on with people and get the thing we want. If the way we speak is inappropriate, we might encounter problems along the way. Good communication skills can help you avoid conflict and solve problems. They are also important in making friends and nurturing healthy relationships. Now, what are we trying to focus on here? The fourth conversation style is the casual. The word casual means relaxed and unconcerned. That's because this style is informal language used by friends and peers. When we talk to our friends, we use the casual style. In this type, there is free and easy participation from both the speaker and listener. Slangs, vulgarities, colloquialism, informal contractions like ain't, gonna, dunno are normal in this type of conversation style. In the picture, the best example is this. They are friends who are reminiscing their high school life. The casual style can be used in every conversation with friends, personal emails, internet chat rooms, blogs, and calls to your buddies. Now, what is your name? This is a question that we often ask whenever we meet people for the first time. Like that time when you first met your best friend. But what is a name? A name is a word which a person is known by or referred to. Obviously, we go by different names. We even have nicknames. Sometimes our nicknames can be obvious. Stephanie's nickname can be Steph. Jasmine can be called Jazz. Freddy's nickname is Fred. But sometimes it can be hard to guess, especially for us Filipinos. For example, I have a friend whose name is Leslie, but then his nickname is Bebe. I also know someone whose name is Cheska, but her nickname is Adeng. And that's me. It's crazy, right? But don't you love it when your friends call you by your nicknames? It makes you feel so special. But even though we know that our friends or people who are dear to us have their names and nicknames, we'll still come up with unique way to call them. Like what your parents call you, anak, when your friends call you bes, or when you ask a label in your relationship. Now, do you want to know the reason why we talk about nicknames? It's because it has something to do with the last conversation style, which is the intimate style. The term intimate means closely acquainted, familiar, or close. It could also mean private and personal. The intimate style applies to conversational experiences between and or among people who share intimate relationships. In terms of how words are pronounced, it is rapid with slur pronunciation, and sometimes letters and words end up getting deleted and are not pronounced at all. Since the people involved in conversation are very familiar with their intentions. Also, nonverbal communication and private code are present in the intimate conversation style. Moreover, grammar and proper word choice are not given importance. The language used in this style may not be shared in public. So what's the best example for this? Oh, in the picture, it's about the boyfriend and girlfriend picture. That's why endearments like honey, babe, mahal are used for two people who are in love. And we also have endearments for our parents, right? Well, that's it. Let's test if you get the concept of the different types of conversation styles later. Thank you for listening. God bless you and take care.
Hi, this is Jeremy once again. For this time, I'm going to discuss the teachings and learnings of the 4 macro skills, specifically in reading and writing. First, we have reading. Traditionally, people imagine reading as a simple process that is linear and passive. However, more recent views have established that it is a complex cognitive process of decoding written symbols. It is a linguistic, sociocultural, physical, and cognitive activity, which involves getting meaning from and putting meaning to the printed text. Reading is an interactive and problem-solving process, making meaning from the text. It processes the following characteristics. Reading is a language skill that can be developed through systematic practice. Reading is a two-way process that involves the communication between the author and the reader. Reading is visual, which involves the transmission of message via optic nerves and requires good eyesight. Reading is a productive process that has purpose, whether academically, personally, or professionally. Reading is the foundation of good writing. Linguists assert that one of the most effective means of developing writing skills is to be a good reader. Through reading, the reader gains knowledge on lexemes, syntax, morphology, and orthography. Reading process can be viewed from 3 different perspectives. We have the bottom-up, top-down, and interactive. Bottom-up processing is data-driven, which puts emphasis on textual decoding, such as letter and word recognition. It assumes that reading progresses from recognizing first the lower-level units towards more complex ones through synthesis in which there is no or little interference by readers' background. Next, we have the top-down processing, which is concept-driven that puts emphasis on schema and reader interpretation. It assumes that reading starts from making meaning in the mind of the reader, which will then influence the sampling of the text to substantiate or disprove the reader's hypothesis. In short, the reader brings his or her background to the text. The limitations of this process is that it requires readers to predict meaning, and only fluent readers would be able to manage such approach. Lastly, we have the interactive meaning, which is both data-driven and concept-driven. It postulates that reading is neither exclusively top-down nor bottom-up. Rather, reading involves the interaction between linguistic knowledge and schemata. Another view of reading process that has emerged is the cognitive constructive view, which emphasizes that reading involves an active search for meaning, which is largely dependent on the reader's schema. From the perspective of the whole pedagogy, reading adheres to some guiding principles. First, no reading occurs without comprehension. However, we should take note that no matter how good the reader is, there will always be misunderstanding of a text. Second, developing reading comprehension is learned through making sense of written language. Third, reading development does not follow a linear development of skills. That is, reading does not develop from part to whole, but from whole to part. Finally, learners need to be exposed to authentic materials that are at their level of interests. It is a known fact that reading involves reading strategies and reading skills. Reading strategies are deliberate, goal-directed attempts to control and modify the reader's efforts to decode text, understand words, and construct meaning. Reading skills, on the other hand, refers to automatic actions that result in decoding and comprehension with speed, efficiency, and fluency, and usually occur without awareness of the components or control involved. They have also advocated for an explicit teaching of both skills and strategies. One way to teach strategy effectively is through assessment. Last but not least, we have suggestions or ways on helping teachers put reading skills to classroom setting and relate them with other macro skills as well. The first step is to arouse students' interest by relating the text to their schema. The next step is to provide learners with things to search for in the text. Then, encourage students to discuss the text to one another. Finally, ask students to write about what they have read. Next, we have writing. Writing refers to the act of putting ideas in text, whether print or non-print. It is a non-linear, exploratory, and generative process as they discover ideas and reformulate them. Writing allows the writer to reflect on the world around her or him. It makes communication effective. It documents and captures thoughts and ideas relevant to decision-making. And it provides knowledge to both the reader and the writer. Any composition we write can either be long or short. It can range from short paragraphs to long essays. With regards to the text types written by students, at elementary level, the most common types of writing are personal narratives. For secondary, it's expository with emphasis on writing about literature. And for tertiary, they expand their writing into argumentative essays. As regards to Language 1, Language 2 writing relationship, Kobayashi and Renert, based on their research, claimed that transfer of writing skills happens in a bidirectional way, which means that from the Language 1 to Language 2, it transfers and vice versa. He further concluded that writing competence can be transferred across languages. Currently, there are 5 approaches to teaching writing. First is product approach. Product approach focuses on what a final piece of writing will look like and measures the product using vocabulary use, grammar, mechanics, content, and organization as a criteria. For a teacher's perspective, it involves assigning a piece of writing, collecting it, and returning it for further revision. Next, we have process approach, which treats all writing as a creative act, which requires time and positive feedback to be done well. In process writing, the teacher moves away from being someone who sets students a writing topic and receives the finished product for the correction without any intervention in the writing process itself. Next, we have genre approach. This looks writing as a predominantly linguistic, but emphasizes that writing varies with the social context in which it is produced. The style of teaching writing gives insights to students of how to replicate successfully particular genres because, let's say, rather than relying on perspective model based advice. Genre approach attempts to identify the features of successful writing within a defined genre and then teach these features to students. Next, we have process genre approach. Teachers focus on what the final piece of writing will look like and measure it against the criteria of vocabulary used, grammatical use, and mechanical considerations such as spelling and punctuation, as well as the content and organization. The normal procedure is to assign a piece of writing, collect it, and then return it for further revision with the errors either corrected or marked for the student to do the corrections. Last, we have the post-process approach where writing should not be taught as a thing, the grammatical functions or let's say the writing process that can in itself be mastered. Post-process theorists believe that writing is public, interpretative, and situated. So for us language teachers, we can use the following concepts mentioned for your respective language classrooms for a more principle-based pedagogy. Nonetheless, the principles that we've mentioned should be taken as suggestive more than conclusive. Once again, I would like to thank everyone for listening to our report, and I hope you have a good day.
Good day, my name is Roma Jenica Villosoria and I am assigned to discuss teaching and testing of listening and speaking. So even though many students have mastered basic listening and speaking skills, some students are much more effective in their oral communication than others, and those who are more effective communicators experience more success in school and in other areas of their lives. The skills that can make the difference between minimal and effective communication can be taught, practiced, and improved. So here in teaching and testing of listening skills, we will be talking about different techniques on how to teach listening and speaking and in assessing it. So some says that when we say that someone speaks a language fluently, we usually mean that they have a high level in all four skills like listening, speaking, reading, and writing. But as many teacher knows, learners often have strengths or weaknesses in particular skills, and in some cases can achieve high levels, for example, reading and writing while not being able to speak or listen at a comparable level. So here, let us define first what is listening. Let us first have the teaching of listening. Well, teaching of listening has attracted a greater level of interest in recent years than it did in the past. Well, university exams, school leaving, and other examination now often include a listening component, acknowledging that listening skills are a core component of second language proficiency, and also reflecting the assumption that if listening isn't tested, well, teachers won't teach it. Earlier views of listening saw it as a master of discrete skills or micro skills. For example, recognizing reduced form of words, cohesive devices, and also identifying keywords in a text, and that these skills should form the focus of teaching. So let us first define what listening is. Listening, like reading comprehension, is usually defined as a receptive skill comprising both a physical process and an interpretive analytical process. Well, however, this definition is often expanded to include critical listening skills. For example, the higher order skills such as analysis and synthesis, and nonverbal listening or comprehending the meaning of tone of voice, facial expressions, gestures, and other nonverbal cues. And the expanded definition of listening also emphasizes the relationship between listening and speaking. So, how are Listening skills assessed. Listening tests typically resemble reading comprehension tests, except that the student listens to a passage instead of reading it. Well, the student then answers multiple questions that address various levels of literal and inferential questions. The important elements in all listening tests are: the first one is the listening stimuli, the questions, and lastly, the test environment. The listening stimuli should represent typical or oral language and not consist of simply the oral reading of passages designed to be written material. Well, in regard to questions, multiple choice items should focus on most important aspects of the passage, not trivial details, and should measure skills from a particular domain. Answers designated as correct should be derived from the passage without reliance on the student's prior knowledge or experience, while test environment for listening assessment should be free of external distractions. If stimuli are presented from a tape, the sound of quality should be excellent. If stimuli are presented by an administrator, the material should be presented clearly with appropriate volume and rate of speaking. Let us now have speaking. So, how are speaking skills defined? So defining domain of knowledge, skills, or attitudes to be measured is at the core of any assessment. So most people define oral communication narrowly, focusing on speaking and listening skills separately. Well, traditionally, when people describe speakings, they do so in a context of public speaking. Recently, however, definitions of speaking have been expanded. One trend has been to focus on communication activities that reflect a variety of settings: one to many, small group, or one to one, and mass media. So, another approach has been to focus on using communication to achieve specific purposes. So, for example, to inform, to persuade, or to solve problems. Another trend has been to focus on basic competencies needed for our everyday life. For example, giving directions, asking for information, or providing basic information in an emergency situation. So basically, that is oral communication. So how are we going to assess speaking skills? In the observational approach, the student's behavior is observed and assessed unobtrusively. In the structured approach, the student is asked to perform one or more specific oral communication tasks. His or her performance on the task is then evaluated. Well, in teaching the speaking skills, we usually ask for the approaches to the teaching of ESL have been more strongly influenced by fads and fashions than the teaching of listening. While in speaking, in traditional methodologies usually meant repeating after the teacher, or even memorizing a dialogue or responding to drills, reflecting the sentence-based view of proficiency prevailing in the audiolingual and other drill based on repetition-based methodologies of the 1970s. But now, in the emergence of communicative language, teaching in nowadays is continually shaping. So we have now the grammar-based syllabuses were replaced by communicative syllabuses built around notion, function, skills, tasks, or other non-grammatical units of organization. So we focus on the fluency. So it became a goal for speaking courses, and this could be developed through the use of information gap and other tasks that required learners to attempt real communication despite limited proficiency in English. So, why do we need to practice listening and speaking skills, and how to practice it? So, we need to teach our students activities and games that bolster their ability to demonstrate listening skills while also having fun. Because most of the time, the activities that we give them or activities in the book are kind of boring and they lose interest into it. So we need to think of any activities and games that could get their interest. Another by providing ongoing support and displaying anchor charts that list expectations such as voices off, eyes on the speaker, focus attention on the speaker. That's it. How to practice listening and speaking skills. So we need to teach students different activities and games that bolster their ability to demonstrate listening skills while also having fun. We need also to provide ongoing support by displaying anchor charts and list expectations, so different strategies in listening skills. Also, we need to provide multiple opportunities to practice. So we should give them more activities, uh, more listening and speaking activities for them to practice that skill. Give explicit and inclusive positive feedback for them to be interested and to improve all their weaknesses, improve their skills. Help students reflect on their progress with listening and speaking skills, and lastly, use a variety of interactive learning structures that vary ways to practice the skills, such as inside-outside circles, four corners, SWAT meet, partner chat, and table talk, and many more listening and speaking skills. So why these skills matter? The four macro skills, not only the listening and speaking. Well, it matters for us to have productive discussions in all subjects. Students need to be able to express ideas clearly, concisely, and confidently. So having successful communication skill leads to better social relationships. So when they have that skills, well, most of the time, well, they will be successful in whatever conversations they will have. They will be more sociable to other students or to other people. So, for any conversation, knowing when to speak and when to listen is essential. So, that would be it. Thank you very much.